Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 843 for the 1st of December 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia. And this is a very special episode of the Skeptic Zone. It's actually Squaring the Zone. This is the first joint venture between the Squaring the Strange podcast and the Skeptic Zone. This is a live recording recorded at Skepticon XL just about a week ago. In fact, exactly a week ago. In front of a live audience, Ben Radford, myself, and Maynard.
I'm going to pass over to our final session for this evening. We have our good friend here, Richard Saunders, talking to us about Squaring the Zone podcast. So welcome the panelists to the stage.
Well, right here, we're welcome to Squaring the Zone, the first joint venture of two of the world's leading skeptical podcasts, even if they do say so themselves. They told me repeatedly before we started this morning. Now, all the way from Sydney, we've got the host of the Skeptic Zone podcast, now in its 17th year, and Lifetime Achievement Award, and he's still alive. He might get another one, Richard Saunders.
Hello, thank you.
And from the other side of the flat earth, Albuquerque, New Mexico, a song made famous by Weirdo Yankovic, the host of Squaring the Strange, Ben Radford. He's met the guy off Ancient Aliens. You can ask him about that later. Look, let's start off with the history of Squaring the Strange, since we've got our overseas visitor here first. Is there anything you guys are going to ask?
Wait a minute. Oh. Who are you?
Oh, that's right.
Right.
I play Maynard on social media. My name's Maynard, maynard.com.au. It's not a skeptical website. You'll find stuff about Weirdo Yankovic, 80s music, and fashion. Not always good fashion either, always on that. And I do a podcast with Tim Ferguson as well. But I'm just here to keep this whole thing moving here, but I think we should let the guests from overseas talk about Squaring the Strange there. How long's that been going? It hasn't been going as long as Richard's.
No, it has not. We are among the young pups in the admittedly shallow pool, I have to say. But we've always been very grateful to Richard and the SGU folks and others as well, Ono, Ross, and Carrie. So we're sort of the more recent additions, but we found our own niche. I first did podcasts, some of you may have heard, called Monster Talk many years ago with two co-hosts, and that sort of fell by the wayside. And then more recently, of course, we have Squaring the Strange, which is with my co-host Celestia Ward and occasional co-host Pascal Romero. So it's a nice sort of blend of, she is a caricature artist in Las Vegas. In fact, done some caricatures of Richard that are quite good. That's right, forgotten that.
Yes, the main artwork for my site was done by her, and also Pascal. It's good there's three of you. It's like when he's a musician, he actually has worked with Shriekback and bands like that, so I'm very interested in his stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the cool parts about it, is that we have this sort of diverse group. You wouldn't necessarily have lumped us together, right? A caricature artist from Vegas, a professional skeptic, and a former rock and roll musician, still occasionally touring now, doing telecom stuff. So it's a fun lot.
And what do you think's been your most contentious episode you've done? The one you got most email and social media flack about?
Well, there's been a couple. We did a series on moral panics. And as you might imagine, sort of the nature of moral panics is that people don't like to admit they are moral panics. That's sort of what they do. So when you point out that some of their fears are unfounded or just flat out exaggerated, sometimes you get some pushback saying, no, what you're afraid of is silly, but what I'm afraid of is real. So we got a little bit of pushback from some of those.
And of course, Ben, a question that's always asked at the beginning of each of the Squaring the Strange: what are you skeptical of this week?
Sway so what are you skeptical of this week?
Well, this week, actually, as it happens, I was up in Darwin just a couple days ago, and I picked.
You've got the Darwin Bible there.
Yes, the NT News for those who. And what struck me, whenever I travel, I make it a point I like to talk to the locals whenever I can, just cab drivers, Uber drivers. I like to sort of get a sense of what people are thinking about, and also pick up the local newspaper. And in this case, I happen to notice it says anguish over Angie. It was about a woman who disappeared 2 years ago in Northern Territory. And I sort of flipped through this sort of typical, missing persons case. And then I picked up another local paper off the leash, and I found a reference to someone who I know well-ish, John Edward. Yes, American psychic John Edward. So he was apparently here or up in Darwin 2 weeks ago, just sort of preceding me. It's probably just as well that we didn't cross paths. But what struck me was we have a desperate search for a missing woman who's been gone 2 years now, and here we have an internationally known psychic who is making money off people and selling out his seminars. I'm wondering, where was he? Where were you, John? I mean, you're doing your tours, you're selling your books, you're charging people $300 an hour for your stuff. Hey, how about helping out? How about all these real cases that you could allegedly help out with? Missing persons with families who are desperate for answers. Don't see him helping out.
It doesn't work that way.
Oh, it doesn't work that way? Okay, well, I thank you for that, the clarification. I've been wondering how that works.
Has he ever claimed to have found missing people or helped the police before?
He's made some of those claims. So it's interesting, in the world of psychic mediums, there's sort of different nuances, right? So there are sort of professional mediums. And late Sylvia Brown, convicted felon, as I like to remind people, she definitely made many missing persons claims. Others, such as Tyler Henry, Susan Gerbic has done some great work exposing some of those people. They are more sort of one-on-one cases. But in a lot of these cases, you do have people who will sort of latch on to the latest high-profile case and offer information. It's very frustrating because you'll see headlines like, "Psychic helps police." And you click on the story, it's like, no, the psychic told the police something which has not been proven true or not. So psychic helps police is not the same as psychic said something that may or may not come to fruition. So that's frustrating.
So there's basically two types of psychics: the ones that are fooling the public and the ones that are fooling themselves.
Ooh. He's insightful. Where'd you get him?
Very good. I know.
I don't know. We should have him back.
I'm not the skeptical one either.
There's some truth to that. I mean, it's a case of where, and Richard knows this as well as I do, it's where you never really know, right? I mean, I think a lot of them are self-deluded. Most of the psychics that I've met, and I even briefly dated one, which is a whole other story.
Hang on a minute. I believe burying the lead there. And she had no idea it was going to end?
That's awkward, yes.
I'm just saying what you're all thinking.
But no, I mean, in most cases, and again, I've seen this with people who see ghosts and this and that. They're sincere. They really did have some experience that they can't explain, or they've sort of bought into the pop culture explanation for it. And so there's some people that are outright con men and con women, and others who I think they can do something, but they don't like being put to the test, I'll tell you that.
All right. And Richard, you want to tell us a bit about the history of the zone, the Skeptic
Zone.
Yes.
I put on my podcasting voice. The Skeptic Zone really started in one form or another about, what year is this? Yeah, over 20 years ago, where I had a weekly session on Net FM radio with my friend Stefan Soika, who still is credited as the original co-host of the Skeptic Zone. He comes in periodically. And so I would be on his Net FM internet radio show every week, and I'd bring in skeptics from the committee 20 years ago or so, and we'd talk about psychics and whatnot. And when that show came to an end, Stefan and I thought, well, we'll just keep doing stuff. So we cobbled together a little audio show. This is really before podcasting was a thing. Then for a while, for about a year, we went to video. And I was making a half an hour video show with us fronting the camera and me with the camera going out doing reports. But to make a half-hour video show every week is just terrible. It's so demanding. So that was a fun project, and I'm glad I did it. And then about that time, as a few years went by, I went to my first amazing meeting, and I met the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe people and Brian Dunning and other podcasters. And about then, I just decided to launch the Skeptic Zone. The Skeptic Zone. And in fact, the very first broadcast or recording was done in Atlanta, Georgia, at DragonCon.
DragonCon, yeah.
Giant fantasy festival where they have a skeptical part of their show. And right from the beginning of the Skeptic Zone, when I was deciding on a format, my inspiration for a format was Simon Townsend's Wonderworld. Some of you will remember that. And if you remember the show, Simon would introduce the show, and he would tell you what's coming up. He would say, on this evening's show, we have this reporter talking about this. Following that, it's this, and following. And I thought, that's not a bad format. And that to this day, that's how the show works. So people who listen to my podcast, The Skeptic Zone, I introduce it, and I tell you exactly what's coming up. And it's a little different to Ben's show. Mine is really a segment show or a magazine show. In other words, there are definite segments to it. So there'll be an interview, there might be a field report, there might be stories from my reporters, especially now up in Canada, Adrian Hill and Kat McLeod, the loons from Canada. All my reporters, and I think there's been about 20 over the years, something like that.
Quite a cadre you've developed there.
Yeah. After 17 years, I always write a little bit of music for each, because you'd know this, Maynard, theme music is very important. When you hear someone's theme music, it's like the theme music to a TV show. Think of all the TV shows you know, and you can hear the theme music going in your head. So when my reporters come on, they get their own music, so the audience know, oh, it's this music, they associate it with this certain reporter, and away we go. You've got a little bit of theme music too when you do reports.
Oh, yes, but I usually copyright infringe. I just use the Odd Couple theme. Works for everything. What's going on in the skeptical? Hey, but what is the go with the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet who's obsessed with condiments?
Oh, yes. Part of the fun of the Skeptic Zone is, I've got little ad breaks sometimes, and I in fact, I often play promotions for Squaring the Zone. Not Squaring the Zone, for Squaring the Strange.
A fine podcast you've never heard of. No, and I have to thank you so much. You've been nothing but supportive of the podcast, and we're still going, but it is nice to and every time whenever Celestia sends me it's like, oh, it's very weird. We have 20 more subscribers in Australia. I'm like, well, that's Richard. That is entirely due to Richard. So.
Well, part of the philosophy of my podcast is I promote other podcasts because I don't believe we're in competition. No. We should promote each other. So I'm happy to promote any skeptical podcast or skeptical podcast. So when the pandemic hit, we couldn't do Skeptics in the Pub anymore. And we decided to go online. So every month we'd have a Skeptics in the Pub online. Usually I would host it and we'd have special guests, but it was all done by Zoom. And I thought, well, how can I promote this? And you don't know where these ideas come from. And my friend Michelle Biggersma, who's a reporter in Melbourne, I said to her, maybe we could do a funny thing where I'm upset and sad because I can't go to the Skeptics in the Pub, and you can assure me that there's Skeptics in the Pub online. And somehow we wrote this thing where she's an angel that appears from the internet and says, don't worry, Richard, you can still meet up online, but we've had lots of adventures with the skeptical fairy godmother angel. She also likes maple syrup. You'd have to listen to the show to understand that. And she used to be the tooth fairy.
Wow. I'd like to hear how she lost a job. That would be interesting. Now, you both do very different kinds of podcasts in some ways. Like yours is you don't even interview people every week, do you?
We occasionally do, not that often. Typically, it's a case of where I'll be meeting with Celestia and or Pasquale, and we'll just sort of say, it's something that's. I think part of the reason that we've been at this for 5 years and change, we started on April Fool's Day, which was honestly an accident. But we did not intend to. It just happened to drop on April 1st. But part of it was that, as with Monster Talk and most of the books that I've done, I've been very fortunate in my life to largely. There we are. I'm the bald one on the right. Yes,
you look really angry about something.
That was my badass look or something.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Ben. I was confused which one was you.
Well, yes, Celestia. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So part of the longevity is finding topics that interest me, because I couldn't be doing this, and I think the same for life. It's you can't, if you're doing it for somebody else, then you that's how you burn out. And so, to the extent that we keep doing this because I'm interested in something, or it's a subject that I've personally investigated, I've written an article on it and this and that, and so that turns into it. And then the other source is folklorist. So I'm a folklorist, and I speak at folklore conferences, and inevitably I'm at some folklore conference and somebody will come up and give a 20-minute talk on the strangest folklore topic. We need to have that person on the show. Could you give us
a broad definition of what that is, folklore?
Sure. It's most people don't know what folklore is. It's odd. People are like,
well, contemporary folklore. I bought the book The Vanishing Hitchhiker.
Yes.
Which to me kicked off a bit of a contemporary.
And same for me. So that was written by a colleague of mine, Jan Bruinvand, and he is sort of considered the godfather of urban legends. And I was fortunate to have him write an introduction to one of my pieces. So that just like you, that was my introduction to folklore. But basically, it covers a wide variety of things. So it's fairy tales, it's conspiracy theories, it's gossip, it's rumor, it's ghost lore. It is all the sorts of narratives. It's even things like what's called foodways. Foodways. What is that? It's sort of stories about kitchens and food preparation. So you could even I know. Here's the thing about the folklore.
Sounds okay to me so far.
Well, I know it's weird because you go to these conferences and there's people talking on their pet interest, and it is so obscure. Like you'll be seeing someone is talking for 25 minutes on illustrations in 13th century German cookbooks. And you're thinking, nobody cares about this. And then you go and like, this is really interesting. This is super cool. I had no idea. And so I'll give you an example. In fact, the most recent episode is actually an interview with a folklorist colleague of mine in Canada. And she's discussing the conspiracies about Canadian wildfires, about how there's political conspiracies and sort of the Jewish space lasers and all that. So that sort of folds into the folklore.
And you both got different types of shows. Are there any questions you want to ask each other about each other's podcasts? I mean, Ben would love to have all those people doing the work on his show for him, I'm sure.
I'm sure you would, Ben.
But you've got those cats, so...
Cats, the Skeptic Zone cats, they always help me up in the studio. My question to you, Ben, is there are three of you.
Yes.
You're not in the same place, are you? Where are you all?
We're in the ether, Richard.
You're out there.
So Celestia is in Las Vegas. I am in Albuquerque, and the other co-host, Pasquale, who's been on sort of sporadically, he is also in the same city, although we don't actually... Actually, of course, during COVID, we weren't meeting in there anyway. So the three of us are there, and usually, and I give all credit to Celestia for editing the show. She pulls it together. To the extent that I sound smart, it's because of her editing. Let me tell you. But yeah, so that's how that works. And then every now and then, of course, if we're at a conference or something, then we'll.
Yeah, but when you say that, were you shouting? Are you very loudly at each other? I mean, how is it? How do you sound like you're all in the same studio? That's what I'm getting at.
Right? No, yeah. So, hello. So, have you seen ear trumpets? Do you know what those are?
Sorry, what?
Ear trumpets, Richard.
Is that how it works?
Yeah. It's a big. You see them in the old cartoons. No, we use a program called Zencaster. And I don't, what do you don't use that? What do you use? No, you just.
No, I just shout.
You shout. That makes sense. Well, of course, we're in the future compared to where I am, so it's always very, very confusing. It's trying to sort our time zones. I'm still figuring that out. But yes, that's how we do it. And every now and then, if we happen to be in the same place, like for example, a skeptics meeting or something, then we'll bang one out.
So basically, what happens is you're in your location, Pasquale and his and Celestia, but you're all hooked up to the same program, the same internet thing, right?
Yeah, and it actually works very well because on the occasions that we do have guests, they can just click on the link and it goes right to it. They don't need to download anything. It's very, very straightforward. So it's.
In fact, I've been a guest on your program once, and I was sitting in front of my computer with the headset on, I think, and I could see the other people interacting in the waveforms, and it worked very well.
Cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
And because that all goes up to the cloud, and then Celestia pulls it down and edits it. That's how it goes?
That's basically it, yeah.
Right. I've only heard of Zencast when it doesn't work. When, for some reason, you've just done a 2-hour interview with someone and it hasn't recorded. That's the only time I've ever heard it used. Has that happened on your show?
They've gotten better. They've gotten better. There was a time when we were drawing straws to see who was going to spend 8 hours on tech support with Zencaster. Fortunately, we haven't had to do that in a while, but it's okay.
Look, Richard also recently is a regular segment on the Skeptic Zone. You spend a lot of dark time in dark rooms with magazines.
Oh, that time, yes.
Oh, they're talking to me. I'm going to duck out of this one. Go ahead.
Okay, well, you're talking about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project.
That's correct.
That's right. Well,
it was part of TROVE, yes.
Oh, yes. Well, I do a lot of research, as you might imagine, writing many articles for Tim down there. I'm often in the State Library of New South Wales with the microfilm and the microfish and the micro crabs and all that sort of stuff.
The micros,
researching things going back decades and decades and decades. And in fact, this brings me to you did the what are you skeptical of this week? So
yes.
I'd like to do a regular segment from the Skeptic Zone called the TROVE archives.
Best use of porn music ever.
Now it's time once again to visit those archives at TROVE. So the TROVE archives, if you don't know of them, it's a wonderful thing from the National Library of Australia, trove.nla.gov.au. I've said that thousands of times that I can't say it live. You go there and it's the reservoir of Australian newspapers and magazines and journals and publications and menus and I don't know what else.
Although the search engine isn't as intuitive as you'd want it. I've gone there and just gone home after 2 days. You can't find what you want sometimes. You got to get to know it.
I found you in there.
I know. I can't find me in there.
But then you type in your search criteria. It goes back to the 1800s. And it'll give you a list of references to... My goodness me, there it is. Look at that, the TROVE archives. So, this week I thought we'd visit the year 1942. On the 3rd of January is published in the Daily Mirror, which was a magazine in Sydney, Australia from 1941 to 1955. You do learn about a lot of newspapers that have come and gone. And this will be of very great interest to you, Ben. Here's a story. Loch Ness Monster bobs up again. Now remember, this is 1942. Daily Mirror World Service, London. In the rapidly diminishing memories of peacetime, there lives the story of a monster. For quite a time, while the war was little thought of, the Loch Ness Monster occupied many columns of front pages throughout England. Travellers saw it. Fishermen saw it. Innumerable people saw it, but no one could ever prove such a monster really existed. Sounds like a fascinating report. Historians went through their dusty volumes on prehistoric monsters, providing lurid descriptions of what the monster might look like. The disbelievers snorted. Ready?
That's the best I can do short notice.
Thank you. Hallucinations, or a trick of the light, was their theory. Came the war, and little things like monsters slid into oblivion. Strange, but for nearly 2 years, not one person claimed to have seen it again. I think they had other things on their mind. But apparently the monster has slid a long humped body into the world again, under wartime conditions this time. Mr. J. McFarlane Barrow and 3 of his children were out on a yacht dinghy when the monster broke surface near Glendo Pier. They saw, quote, a long, snaky neck, 15 to 18 feet of body shaped rather like an upturned boat. Might be a clue, end quote. For something like 10 minutes. Said Ms. McFarlane Barrow, quote, it raced up and down and across the loch as if it were really in high spirits. Occasionally it dived and reappeared with the agility of a giant seabird. Might be another clue. It must have covered 7 miles during the display. Sometimes it moved so rapidly that columns of water several feet high were thrown up. Shh. Explain that, Mr. Skeptic.
You've got a couple ones. Haven't you got upturned boat, bird, or just plain drinking?
Well, I was curious about the description of Nessie with a jaunty walk. I thought that was especially well, clearly he's happy or she's happy. It's just,
but it's a wonderful thing. And each week on my podcast, I have a section of stories from the past, reports about all sorts of things. In fact, the episode that just went up this morning during this convention, I read a report from 1995, and you'll know about this one, the alien autopsy.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that story well. Yes.
And for those people who don't know, there was a film hoaxed in. It was a hoax. How about that? Can you have some?
What
film? They put together a dummy alien. They put some sheep's livers or something in there, and
yeah, it was a production. I think it was a Robert Keviat. I think it was, and it was this whole production. It was and the Bob Guccione, the publisher of Penthouse, paid like $4 million for these photos of this, not of women, mind you, but of this staged alien abduction. And it was just so silly. I mean, and finally somebody said, "Well, the phone." The phone cord in the back of the image was not of the era. I'm thinking, this is what you find sketchy? That none of the rest of this bullshit, it's the phone cord that is a red flag to you. Okay.
I think they did manage to find some original Kodak film from the period to expose it on.
They did.
They did do that.
Well, there's the latest episode of the Skeptic Zone up there, and guess what? Ben Radford is the star of this week's episode.
How
about that?
But also the doctors weren't holding the scissors correctly.
Right, the forest.
That was the big giveaway, because it's kind of important when you're meeting a new species.
You want to be friendly.
You want to do it right.
I've got a question for Maynard, because Maynard's been a reporter on the Skeptic Zone for over a decade now. We've had some interesting adventures, Maynard.
What was the cemetery we went to? Remember we went to a cemetery and they were doing all sorts of things.
We went with then committee member Alethea Dean 10 years ago.
Wow.
10 years ago to the Fields of Mars Cemetery in Ryde, I want to say, here in Sydney.
I think it is the only time I've ever been there, but it was quite there was a person having a moment when I was there who was channeling the voice of a 2-year-old child that had died. I found it a bit disturbing, actually.
It was a bit strange. We turned up, it was a stinking hot night, so we were very heat at nighttime was terrible, but we met up with a group of ghost hunters and spirit finders or seers and people like that.
But then it got really good when the Hens Night turned up.
That's right.
Would you perhaps like to describe that, Richard?
We were there, the ghost hunters were there. They had their radio, the radio, right? Trying to find ghost voices. They had a Ouija board, and a bus turns up with a Hens Night. They all get out and say, "It's Maynard!" And they all run over to Maynard.
Well, I've got that ghostly career thing going on, I guess. So yeah, but I had a bit of a chat with them, and then they were what were they doing? There was one of the ones where they were talking to the dead.
Ouija board.
Ouija board.
Yeah, they had
a spinning
thing. And this Ouija, the Ouija board, which has the letters of the alphabet, and you all put your hands on it, the planchette, and you say, "Is anybody there?" And the planchette moves around. Well, this Ouija board was very reluctant to do anything. No, it was just not doing anything until a certain ghost hunter turned up, and suddenly it was answering all our questions. It was quite amazing. But that was a really great experience. I think.
It was getting towards midnight. We left, and they were still going. They were just cackling and having a great time doing it.
And the radio they had is known as a ghost box or a spirit box. You'd be familiar with these, Ben, which is a radio which is designed not to stay on a frequency. In other words, it goes through the frequencies, picking up whatever stray sounds it can get.
Because interestingly enough, if you had it tuned in Sydney to the AM frequency, they would mainly be talk stations, wouldn't they?
That's right.
Well, in their defense, I have to say that the explanation they give is ludicrous, but it basically is that if you point out to them, well, basically using a broken radio, it's cycling through the different stations and it'll just get little clips, and you can set it whether it's a half a second, a full, whatever it is, and they had this sort of fine tuning thing, and then they will record it, and then they will go back and they will listen to it. Oh, can you hear something? They'll ask it the questions, right? Is there a ghost here? What's your name? How did you die? These sorts of things, and when you point out to them quite accurately that all this is doing is just capturing. I mean, that was Frank Sinatra. That wasn't the voice of the dead. Because it was this station. We can validate this. They say, well, yes, but the spirits, what they're doing, it's very clever or not, is the spirits are snatching little phonemes out of radio commercials, Coke ads, AM radio, news, The Who, take your pick, AC/DC, and then just Angus Young is suddenly in there telling part of a ghost story. So they admit that. They acknowledge that they're basically using a broken radio the wrong way, but they say, yes, but the spirits are using human recorded voices to communicate, which of course is garbage.
Well, that would indicate that the spirits can manipulate the real world activities, so why couldn't they just send you a text?
You're thinking about this the wrong way, Maynard.
It doesn't work like that.
I've heard that before.
It doesn't
if you're going to include some critical thinking here, this is going to be a very short panel.
Now, I'd like to remind you, Maynard, something we don't need reminding of because it is so fresh in our memories. So, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, we attended the first night in Sydney of a podcast meetup group.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And we thought, that sounds like something we should be involved with. So we turn up, and it was initiated by just one of the best people who have ever lived, Dr. Siobhan O'Sutherland, who had a podcast called Knowing Animals. She was into animal rights and treat animals with dignity, and she was I think she had a PhD in biology. I can't quite remember.
Yes.
But just, one of the most wonderful people you could ever meet. We got very good friends with her, would hang out and do podcasting things. And then not so long ago, she let us know that she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And it was too late. It was stage 3 or I can't remember the stage it was. And she contacted me. She said, I've got this ovarian cancer. I'm not going to survive. Awful shock to hear that from a friend. And she said, you know what? I really want to spend the rest of my life, which I think ended up to be about 2 years after she let us know, less than 2 years. And she said to me, can we go out? I've discovered the most haunted street in Sydney, which is in Glebe, apparently, just not far from here.
Just under the aqueduct.
Yeah, it's a very strange place. And she said, can we go out there and look for a place for me to haunt? I'm sitting on the phone going, and she said, what I want to do is have a little adventure on your podcast, and while we're doing it, I want to tell everybody about ovarian cancer. And that's what we did.
A very powerful episode.
Very powerful episode.
I was interviewing her about her wanting to haunt that particular place, and I said, really, you shouldn't limit yourself to near where you live. I mean, if you're a spirit, why do you have to go to any particular place? Why not go on a tour or something? Haunt a few places, go to places in Italy you've never been to, you've always wanted to go to. And she hadn't thought of that, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, why limit yourself to a house or a street?
Go on holiday, right? Haunt a cruise ship.
Haunt a bloody continent.
Yeah, or the next time one of those billionaires is going into space, take a ride up there, go see space. Why not?
Now, of course, she was looking for an interesting angle we could use on the Skeptic Zone to put across a very serious message. So it was quite surreal. It was just sort of on the tail end of COVID, so we're still masked up, I think. But Maynard, Siobhan and I walked around this whole area looking under spooky areas and talking about where the ghosts might be.
Oh, yeah, and there were lots of huntsman spiders everywhere.
Oh, yes.
At the right time of the year, because there was abandoned tents, and they'd got inside the tents and everything, yeah. So that was the scariest thing I found.
Yeah, and I can't admire her too much.
Amazing woman.
An amazing woman, because when we did that, she'd already had major surgery to try and help her. And when she had her surgery, abdominal surgery, she suffered a stroke and went blind in one eye. She was one of these people, no matter what life threw at her, the horrors of going through this, she was optimistic and wanted to help people.
Yes.
It was truly amazing, yeah. So that was one of the most, I think it's probably one of the most moving things
one of the best episodes of The Zone for sure, but we've done so many, and they've gone through, how many different reporters do you think you said you've had on the show?
In the vicinity of 20, I think, yeah. You want to be a reporter?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. Well, actually, I was going to ask you, Richard. So, given that you have this huge body of episodes, and of course, in light of your recent well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award,
which he may win again.
Could you do one per lifetime? How does that work?
Well, it says lifetime, but it does. If you're still alive, you can always get it again.
In my next life.
Okay. Well, I was curious. So, I followed your work. We've been friends for many, many years, and so I was wondering, what would you consider like 2 or 3 of your your favorite investigations, the Great Australian Psychic Prediction is an amazing piece of investigative work. That's amazing, but that's sort of a high profile recent one. But I'm wondering if there are other ones that maybe go back longer that maybe aren't as well known, but that you're especially proud of,
I know one of the controversial ones that I didn't have to worry about it, but you got the mail about it, is when I interviewed Jessica Adams, the astrologer, on the show. Yes. People were not happy.
People were not happy.
They were not happy.
Well, one of my favorite episodes was in the vicinity of 10 years ago. On the one episode, I interviewed James Randi, and I think it was at a convention or something like that, but it was just a really nice chat with James Randi. We sat down and we were swapping stories, and it just, when I listened to it back, I thought, it's great, And on the same episode, I interviewed Dr. Richard Wiseman. So I happened to be all over the world. I happened to be in Edinburgh, and Richard and I took a walk by the river and just chatted about psychology and skepticism and things like that. No script, no idea what we were going to say, but it turned into a wonderful conversation walking along the river. And those things you can't buy, So, I do like field reports, and we've done other ones apart from the ghosts.
A bit all over the place, yeah. And also sometimes you'll even host the place from a report from somewhere. The whole show will come from somewhere.
You and I did a paranormal conference once up in the Blue Mountains.
Up at the Blue Mountains, and also Maitland Jail had a one-off paranormal conference too that was pretty good. I wanted to ask you, with the psychic prediction project that you did, you looked at lots of magazines. Who's better with predictions? Is it That's Life or Women's Weekly? I don't want to waste my money, Richard.
New idea, I think.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, they got pictures of the Queen in there too.
That was quite a process, and Steve Roberts, Steve, helped me with that in Melbourne. So in Sydney, I raided the library here, the State Library of New South Wales, and I can't remember which. I think it was Women's Day. I went through the entire back catalogue of Women's Day going back to the year 2000, page by page, and looking for every psychic prediction. Then a year later, I went and spent a week with Steve Roberts in Melbourne, and every day we travelled to the National Library of Victoria and went through the other new idea, page by page, thousands of pages. So, you know, when people talk about this project, it took a lot of work and time. Yes, it bloody did. It really did.
And just with the abstract, Richard, what was the percentage of hits that all of the predictors in all these magazines over the period of time got correct? What was the percentage?
The broad percentage of predictions that we found were correct after 3,811 predictions analysed, roughly it's 11%. 11% of predictions published in Australia from the year 2000 to the year 2020, you could categorise in one sense or another of being correct, which means the other roughly 89% are either wrong, which was the majority of them, were too vague to really mark, just waffle, vagueness, or we didn't know, we couldn't find out the answer. So it's a too vague, wrong, and predictable. Some of the predictions we read at what do you see coming this year, psychic? I can foretell earthquakes in California. What? Yeah, I know, right?
And a lot of them missed the death of the Queen too, didn't they, surprisingly? It's like they'd forgot she's going to die one day and they forgot to predict it.
Well, no, what they did was they predicted it every year.
Oh well, the other way.
I did something similar to that when I was in Buffalo, New York for a decade, where Skeptical Inquirer and Center for Inquiry is. I happened to come across a stack of newspapers, and it was predicting things that happened in 2001. And I was curious to see how many psychic predictions had predicted 9/11. And this was a natural experiment, just sort of like Richard was talking about. So I fortunately didn't spend I didn't have to go that far, but I went back and there was a local alternative news weekly, which had, every year, of course, they had the typical, hey, here's what's coming up next year, blah, blah, blah. And I'd forgotten about it and noticed like, oh, this is curious. Now that it's 9/13, I wonder what they predicted. So I went back, and there were 10 psychics that were interviewed. One of them had passed away, so I couldn't interview them about them. I don't know if they predicted that or not.
There are ways.
There are ways, yes. But I contacted all of them. I said, so I'm just curious. You're a well enough known psychic that you're being just interviewed in local TV and news, and this newspaper. How did you possibly miss the 9/11 attacks? I'm genuinely curious. You by any metric it was an important. It certainly set America on a different path, and globally, worldwide. And if you're going to predict something, that would be something that one might reasonably come up with. 3 of them ignored my request after several times, including knocking on doors. One guy, to his credit, answered my email, and I said, "Yeah, so thanks for returning my call." And he said, "Well, I kind of had a sense of it, but I didn't want to say anything." I said, "I'm sorry, you had a sense of 9/11, but you didn't want to say anything. Really? Are there any other important things you don't want to say anything about? Because that would be the time. And by the way, I'm the guy that you would want to tell that to, because if you can impress me, you can impress anybody." And he blocked me.
In other words, it doesn't work like that.
In other words, it doesn't work that, yeah.
Often Ben turns up on all sorts of paranormal shows and gets hilariously edited all the time. Apparently you believe in Atlantis.
I heard that. Actually, I was on Brian Dunning's, he was mentioning it earlier. Brian Dunning, who, of course, most recently did the UFO movie They Don't Want You to Know About.
Science fiction, right?
Science fiction. It came out, I think, maybe 5 years ago. And it's a really excellent piece of journalism. I think it's available free on Hulu or Tubi or whatever else. And basically, it looks at how I and many others as well, scientists and skeptics and others, are deceptively edited on television shows. So they'll have some actual legitimate biologist talking about something, or an archaeologist, and they'll say, "Oh, do you think it's possible that aliens built the pyramids?" And then the answer will be, no, but they say, "Well, isn't it possible?" Well, anything is possible. Well, what did they use, right? Anything is possible, right? And so I knew that Brian was working on that project, and I actually offered, I'll spare you the whole story. Basically, I sort of went undercover for one of the television shows, because I had been on a TV show called Strange Evidence, where they would send me 15 or 20 clips of what they consider to be unexplainable video. And let me tell you, the things that a TV producer thinks are unexplainable and the things that you or I would think are unexplainable are two very different things. So basically, anything that was weird, anything that the PA dug up, they would send these weird things to me, and they would demand that I look them over and provide a skeptical explanation. Anyway, so I was on a couple seasons of that, and I got annoyed because they kept deceptively editing me. They would just sort of cut my words out, and they would make me say things I didn't quite say. So finally, they called back again. And I said, look, I'm not going to do your show again. I've been on TV. I don't really care. It lost its novelty a long time ago. They said, oh no, but we have a new producer. It'll be fine. We're not going to do that again. Well, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But I contacted Brian, and I said, well, tell you what. I will record, I don't want to say secretly, but it was kind of secretly. I recorded my interview. So I had an actual, I think it was on camera 7 or 8 hours. So I had an entire recording of everything I said. We could then compare it to the edited version. And sure enough, it did it again. And that made the cut. And so I'm in one of the episodes, in one of the segments on the show. And the irony is that even after that film came out, even after I exposed these people, said, this is strange evidence, they're deceptively people, here's what they're doing, they asked me back again. I'm like, dude,
you're at the right price, I think.
Do you want me to burn you again? Because I'll do it. Anyway.
Have you ever met any of the greats of the paranormal? Have you met Eric Von Daniken, George with the big hair from Ancient Aliens? Have you had a good listen to Mysterious Universe, the Australian podcast, or Where Does the Road Go, one of the paranormal ones in the US that has mentioned you?
Every now and then, I've been on, and in fact, for those who were here for my talk yesterday, I've done some TV shows and various ones here and there. Sometimes you sort of meet not on a show, but sort of adjacent to that. There'll be a conference or a Skepticon or what have you. So yeah, and it's one of those things where you don't want to get in a fist fight in the lobby. That's not going to serve anybody. I will tell you that at one point at DragonCon, which, as Richard mentioned, is sort of this massive nerd fest, and I say that in the most loving way, where we have Skeptic Track. We were supposed to at one point have a debate between skeptics and the Ghost Hunters, the TV show Ghost Hunters, Grant and Jason, whoever it is, on the hit show that spent 10 years not finding ghosts. And I had to arrange to have a basically debate between myself and somebody else and the Ghost Hunters, and there was some last second, scheduling error that all right, guys, whatever. So that did not come to fruition.
Look, sometimes some of the best paranormal podcasts are ones that admit that they aren't there to solve it. They don't know if there's a ghost there. The fact that there's a mystery is just enough on its own. And there's a certain bit of science in that as well, wouldn't you say? The mystery is enough, and it can be investigated by science, can't be investigated by paranormal people, but if they're just happy to enjoy the mystery without a palaver,
Well, there's a big mixture of podcasts out there. There are thousands and thousands. So there is everything from what we do is trying to, take a skeptical and reasonable look at things to people who are just out to have a great time. And the truth isn't that important. The story and the entertainment is more important to some podcasts and to some TV shows, right? So they don't mind if the ghost is there or not. It's irrelevant as long as it's an entertaining show.
Well, speaking of a bit of entertaining show, it's about 10 minutes before our time's up here. Do you want to take some questions from the floor?
The floor?
Or the chairs?
The chairs.
Let's ask the chairs.
Okay.
Some
Any
chair
questions?
questions.
Do you have any chairs? Put your arm up. Oh, never mind.
Well, actually, do you listen to any paranormal podcasts at all, Ben? Come on. There must be one on there.
I listen to a few podcasts. I don't really listen to the paranormal. I listen to Skeptic Zone and a couple others. I just don't have the time, honestly. And in the few cases where I'll be watching a television show, usually if anyone's in the room with me, there's yelling very quickly. I'm like, that's not. I know that for a fact. This is not that. So it just gets annoying for them because I'm just kibitzing and just correcting every third statement. So I for my own blood pressure, no, I don't.
I remember listening to an episode of Squaring the Strange once, and when you set the volume on your TV, it's only ever to an even number, isn't it, Ben?
I'm surprised you remember that. That is one of my quirks.
That
one of my
sounds
many
a bit
quirks.
Superstitious to me for someone.
I don't. Yeah, does anyone else do that? There we go.
Oh,
See,
wow.
there we go. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes,
Mine goes up to 11.
as it would. Yes.
But my dad has hearing difficulties. He regularly has his television on 98. I live a couple of blocks away. I can hear it if I open the window, yeah. His neighbours must be having a great time with, I don't know, whatever he's watching late at night, probably Matlock or something.
I guess.
No questions?
We don't. Oh, yes, we do. Right at the front. Oh, a couple in the front and the back. And everybody wants a question. Here we go.
It's not even a question. It's a thank you to a lot of people who might be in this room. And you reminded me when you were talking about your episode with Siobhan, which came out about 3 weeks before my birthday. And for anybody who's on Facebook, around about your birthday, they go, do you want to do a fundraise? And I did, and I think I raised about $700 for ovarian cancer, and it was thanks to you and to
That's right, because she gave the suggestion, didn't she, on the show? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for doing that.
Thank you to everybody who did that.
That's wonderful feedback for a podcaster to hear because, I did the show hoping it would help and to know that it did something.
Yeah, and also in podcasting, apart from the odd angry letter or your dad telling you should get another job, you really don't get a lot of feedback sometimes, and that's amazing to hear. Thank you. That's great you did that. Wow.
Question here.
Thanks very much, guys. Had a great time. Thanks to everyone who's organised this. It's been fantastic the whole weekend. Ben, do you class disinformation as a kind of folklore?
Oh, yeah.
Good question. Yes. So it's a bit tricky because there's the parlance that folklorists use, and there's the general public parlance. So, for example, to folklorists, a rumor may or may not be true. To the general public, a rumor is something that is false and usually scurrilous, and that's just sort of what it is. So sometimes it's difficult because a folklorist will be talking in a folklore context and refer to a rumor that is true, and people are like, well, that's not a rumor. No, we're using it differently. Just in the same way that if you're talking to a physicist and they use the word energy, and you're talking to Deepak Chopra and he uses the word energy, you're probably not using energy in the same way. And so there's actually different ways to parse it out. So there's misinformation, disinformation, there's outright lies, there's bullshit, which is actually an academic term, as some of you may know. In recent years, it's literally called bullshit. And it's basically where, very Trumpian, not to get political, but it's where you basically, you don't care what the truth is. It's truth agnostic. Like, it's not relevant to your purposes. The purpose is to throw something up, to distract, to bloviate, to whatever else, and whether what you're saying is accurate, is factually accurate, isn't the point. I mean, you can complain that it's not true, which is true, but that you're missing the point. That's not relevant to the criterion. So essentially, yeah. So in folklore terms, yes. So there would be, again, misinformation, disinformation. There's different sort of shades of it in an academic context. But certainly from folklore, it would be, yes. So there's rumor, there's gossip, there's narratives, there's different urban legends, and once again, many people think urban legend. The common phrase "urban legend" is often misused because in a folkloric context, they're actually often called contemporary legends because they're not necessarily urban. But I'm just rambling. But the answer is yes. In the back, several in the back.
Couple up there, yeah.
You're making me walk all this way.
Thank you again. Especially going forward in the near future with the fact that so many people don't seem to care about what's true anymore, just what they feel, what they believe to be true, what they believe to be right. Do you personally, any three of you, have any particular advice or ideas on how we can do our thing in this kind of new environment?
We'll just keep doing what we're doing. We think it's the right thing to do. I tend to think that when I was 15, if I didn't watch Carl Sagan's Cosmos and I didn't see James Randi in Australia around the same era and I wasn't introduced to this sort of thing, then I don't know where I would be. So if we keep doing what we're doing, and especially if new people hear what we're doing, I think that's what probably the best use of our time. I mean, it's Paul Willis once told me, Dr. Paul Willis, Professor Paul Willis, who was fighting creationists for a long time, he said, we can't win, but we can lose. And I always thought that was an interesting thing. We'll never beat them completely, although creationism in this country is vanishingly small. But if we just sit back and do nothing, we can lose. So hopefully by reaching new people.
Yeah, I think that's true. I would just add that to some extent, because part of what I do is media literacy, and one thing that I try to drive home to people is that at the end of the day, you can micromanage your own feeds, your own social media accounts. So people can complain all day, and they do, and they often should, about Facebook, about Twitter, about Instagram, about misinformation. Here's the deal. If it comes across your social media account and network, don't share it. If it's some stupid rumor about immigrants eating pets, don't share it. Even if you think it's cute, even if you think it's funny, it has consequences. And I try to encourage people to take back their agency. You can bitch all day about all the different the conglomerates, this and that, but you on a micro level, you can't control what other people do, but on your page you can and should challenge people when they share misinformation. I do it all the time, which is one reason I'm not real popular on Facebook. But
there are other reasons.
There are many reasons. Yes, we can go over them later. You have a spreadsheet, right?
Have you seen your profile photo?
but that's part of it. Is don't instead of complaining that the Elon Musk or Bezos or whoever else, they're a part of the problem, but so are you if you're liking and sharing and not stopping that stuff in its tracks, because you have that power.
Even if you're sharing it to be critical of it.
In some cases, yeah. So there's a whole, we don't have time to get into it, but there's a whole sort of information theory where part of the problem is that in order to debunk something, you have to repeat it, right? In order to tell people what you're debunking, you have to bring it up in the first place, and that sort of, in some cases, repeats it. So typically, there's different ways around it. One is to recast it. In other words, take it out of its original context. Instead of sharing that meme, write something that debunks that without sharing that meme. So that's one. And the other way is just don't share, just stop it. And if someone shares it on your, just tell them, I'm not. You may not care whether you're sharing bullshit on my page, but I do. So it's not going to be tolerated.
Well, I think we're just about out of time here. So let's thank. One more.
Have you considered that if any psychic had predicted 9/11 before the fact, their life wouldn't have been worth living after it occurred. Like, they would have had so many law enforcement officials on their front door that following morning that they would have, never been seen again. Like, to admit to you after the fact that they'd seen it coming could have had legal consequences for them.
Well, no, but the thing is that was published in the newspaper, so I didn't have to challenge them on it. The fact is that they were asked what important events are going to happen the next year. You can come up with all sorts of ad hoc explanations as to why they didn't do it, but the fact is that none of them predicted it, and they acknowledged as much. And here's the other thing, is that police and psychics and other police have to listen to some psychics just because it's information. They don't sort of believe them, but there's information. So law enforcement agencies get misinformation, bogus warnings about stuff all the time. So it's, and that doesn't mean that anybody who gives information is arrested or in trouble. So I don't buy that, but I see what you're saying.
Okay. Well, look, thank you. We're out of time now. Please thank Richard Saunders from the Skeptic Zone and Ben Radford from Squaring the Strange. Get those podcasts. My name's Maynard. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Squaring the Zone podcast this week. A special presentation by the Skeptic Zone and Squaring the Strange. And thank you very much to Tim Mendham. A special shout out to Tim Mendham this week because he did much of the work to make Skepticon XL, the Australian Skeptics National Convention, such a big success. It was a really great conference and people have been raving about the presentations. And I think everybody had a really great time. Coming up on next week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, back to a more regular format with contributions by Kat McLeod and Adrian Hill. And who knows what else we'll have lined up for you. A big thank you to those people who continue to support the show via Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv. It's because of your monthly or weekly payments that the show manages to keep going. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
So, hey, Kat, want to play a game with me?
Ooh, that sounds like a horror movie. Yeah, I want to play.
Before we get to the dice game, though, I have to acknowledge an error that I did not catch in the last newsletter.
Ooh.
Did you catch the error? It was a math error. And I have to thank Leonard Trammell for pointing this out to me. So, hi, Leonard.
Hi, Leonard.
It had to do with the Bermuda Triangle. And there was a joke made about dodecahedrons and icosahedrons. Do you see the problem yet?
In relation to the Bermuda Triangle?
Yes. A triangle, think about it,
is three sides.
It's three sides, but only two dimensions.
That's very true. Otherwise, it's a pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. Or a tetrahedron.
Or a hexahedron thingy. You know I'm bloody well tired, Adrian.
Hey, I was tired too, and I usually read the newsletter pretty cold, just to make sure there's giggles. And I did not pick up on that at all. And when Leonard sent me a message, I was like, oh, he's so right. And I'm sure there's a few other people out there who caught that as well. So there you go. So thanks, Leonard, for pointing that out. And that was a fun one.
And cheers to all the really smart math people who are clearly more awake than we are sometimes. And a big shout out to Tom, who said hello via...
in the pub.
Yeah, in Skepticon.
Oh, that's right. It was at Skepticon. Tom at Skepticon. Hello, Tom.
I'm so glad that our insanity keeps you sane.
Enough giggles. We need to get on to the game. So I'm going to go first because of the Bermuda Triangle. This is my homage to the Bermuda Triangle. I am going to use a tetrahedron.
Okay.
All right. You ready? I got my fancy origami box ready to go.
All right. 4 sides.
Okay. 4 sides. So you can go 1 to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 are your numbers. What are you going to guess, Kat?
4.
4? I am going to guess 1. It is a 3.
That's just wrong.
The little tippy top of the tetrahedron. I like that. So we get a 3 for the first one. All right, what are you rolling?
I'm pretty sure this is 20 sides.
And do you remember what that's called?
Isosahedron or something?
Oh, you're close. Icosahedron. Well done.
Icosahedron.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling saucy today, so isosahedron sounds better. All right, so pick a number.
I'm going to guess. Guess what I'm going to guess?
5 for Susan Gerbeck.
No. 20. Because that's what I always pick.
Well, that's true. You always pick 20. And what do I always pick?
19.
That's right. Well, that was not great.
What'd you get?
It's a 7.
7. So not even Susan wins.
You go back in your box and feel shame.
Okay, so this time I think I will pick... I don't think I have an octahedron here.
The 8-sided?
Yeah. Do you have an 8-sided?
Yeah, this one's 8-sided.
Perfect. Well, you roll the octahedron then for me.
Look at you putting me to work. If only I had a fancy machine that would do this for me. Oh, wait. I do.
We forgot to
we didn't
pick.
guess.
Gee, Kat, did you forget how to play this game?
I totally forget how to play this game. I got excited. All right, so what are you going to guess? Because that roll didn't count for anything, clearly.
I am going to guess a 6.
I am going to guess a 7.
Ooh. Watch it be an 8, because it's counting day.
Ooh. It's a 2.
Oh.
It's not loving us.
No. So for the supplemental, did you want to do it or want me to do it? I love this little tiny weeny die.
Little microscopic die. I love
6-sided.
It. It's so cute.
And given to me by Celestia in my Skeptic grade from Squaring the Strange podcast.
I love that.
It's a great thing. I look forward to my Skeptic rates.
And she's such a wonderful human being.
Oh my goodness. And so funny and so witty. Smart. Oh my God.
And talented. All of a sudden, we hate her. No. Hi, Celestia.
All right. Ready?
All right. So we have to guess. I don't know.
Yes. You think we've never played this game before? Have we played this before, Kat? I don't know.
Didn't you say there was a moratorium on giggling? I don't know.
No, that was Richard. Richard is the giggle gate.
You said no more giggles. We had to get down to business.
I did. True. All right.
And we've done nothing but giggle since. But it is a very special day. So.
I can always count on you, Kat, for a giggle.
Well, I can count on Adrian for just about everything. So it's a 6-sided itty bitty teeny tiny die. I'm going to go with 6.
All right. I am also going to go with 6.
Copycat.
Ooh. I do like to copycat. It's a 6. Yes. We're both psychic.
6. The number of the supplemental. That was my lame attempt at an Iron Maiden song.
So the 4 numbers today were 3, 7, 2, and the supplemental 6.
6.
How did everyone do?
I did poorly.
Yes. Well, we did until the last round. For confirmation bias, we only remember the hits, right?
Absolutely. Signing off, the
loons from Canada.